So there you can get an idea geographically of where we are. Okay, this is what a very beautiful clear day looks like at this time of year. So you see the quilt of colors below with the vineyards, and then in the backdrop you have this giant mountain called Monviso. Monviso, when I was living in that little tiny town where I first came, was at the very bottom of this mountain. So every day I was walking to the school I was teaching, and I had this giant peak right in front of me, and it was beautiful. So just some interesting tidbits about Monviso is that the legend has it that this was the inspiration for the Paramount Pictures introduction, the symbol for Paramount Pictures. If you look at it, it does look pretty similar. So
yeah.
But no one really knows if this is true or not. It's also the source of the longest river in Italy, which is called the Po River. So this is a fun, fantastic place to go hiking and go hike up to the source of this really important river. They have lots of different chalets that you can hike all the way up to the top for experts and stay in these little cabins, which are really fun. On a really clear day, you can see not only Monviso, but you can also see the Matterhorn, and you can see Monte Rosa, which are the biggest peaks that we can see from here. Obviously, this is Monviso is on the French border, so this is looking west, and then going up, you'd go to Switzerland, you'd see the Matterhorn and Monte Rosa. Also, this area, the more mountainous area, was famous, became famous during the Olympics. I don't know if you remember in 2006 that Turin was the host for the Winter Olympics. And Torino had always been seen as kind of an industrial city, had a bad reputation. Obviously, you know what happens during the Olympics, they fixed it all up, and there was this new interest in Torino. And now it's a really beautiful, beautiful city to visit. So should they ask questions later at the end or no?
Whenever you, anybody likes, if anyone has a question as you're talking, feel free to jump in, guys. But if not, I'm sure we'll have loads at the end.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So these are two of my favorite places talking about the mountain scene here in Piemonte. So the first picture I think is so spectacular. It's called Sacra San Michele. And Sacra San Michele was an old abbey. It was actually started to be built in 983. So its history is unbelievable. And then in the 12th century is when it became an actual spiritual center, a pilgrimage. It was a pilgrimage where they would actually leave from France, Mont Saint-Michel. It was in line, then studied with Sacra San Michele, and then arrived all the way down to Puglia, which is the heel of Italy, at Monte Sant'Angelo. So it was a complete pilgrimage of 2,000 kilometers that people would embark on from France to the heel of Italy, and this was in the middle. Wow. And Torino is always they say it's like a very spiritual city. It's in the part of the dark black triangle of cities. I think it's like London, Torino, and San Francisco, but it's also part of the golden or the white triangle of the good. And so there's a lot of mystery surrounding Torino in this area. And I don't know if you guys remember the movie or the name In the Name of the Rose with Sean Connery.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, this was the inspiration for the scenery of that film and the actual book that was written.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so let's see. Also it's well known because Piemonte was home to the Savoia royal family back in the 1700s and 1800s. And there's a few of the family members are actually buried inside of this church that was built in this abbey. So it's definitely worth a visit if you ever come. Mm-hmm. Then we have all these valleys you can see with the French border and the Swiss border. There's all these little valleys like you can see on the right picture. And these valleys, like I think pretty much everywhere, are not inhabited very much. All these tiny little villages were being abandoned. And luckily, little by little, now that the wine country called Langhe that we saw is becoming more popular, there's more interest in Piemonte, and slowly these wine valleys are also being discovered, especially for their food, which we'll be talking about. So we'll move on from here. So it's great for hiking. We do have a little bit of skiing in the wintertime, but it's still not really developed yet. But there's definitely potential, I think. Well, it's not really snowing as much anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely later in the year.
Yeah. Okay, here's my favorite part, food and wine, which is my specialty. So I had to only think of main dishes, but there's so many. So the first dish that we're looking at is called gnocchi con castelmagno. So gnocchi are the little potato dumplings. Again, mountain area, so we have a lot of really delicious potatoes, golden colored potatoes. And the way that we eat gnocchi here is always with cheese sauce. So Castelmagno is a special cheese that was first cited back in 1277. And it was not very popular, but just because it's coming from one valley. It can only be made in one valley to be called Castelmagno. It's cow's milk, but it's coming from over 1,000 meters. So these are strict rules that it then became a DOP, which is like a denominazione of origin protected. So it's a protected product now. And once they got that certification in 1996, its popularity rose. It's now one of the most expensive cheeses that we have in Italy. So I remember I went back home to California 19 years ago, and I actually found a slice of Castelmagno cheese that was like this big, and it was like $45. It was crazy. It's very crumbly and dry. And so usually they just mix it with a lot of cream and butter and make a cheese sauce. So I guess this would be like our version of macaroni and cheese here. But very rich. And when you're in Italy, every region, as you probably know, is almost like its own country. So when you get gnocchi, it's always almost with this cheese sauce. You go to Liguria next door, and the gnocchi will be with pesto. It's like they don't know anything else but those classic dishes. They don't experiment very much, but it's very traditional. Then we have polenta, concha. This is a polenta that is mixed in with lots of butter. It's basically a soup of butter and full of polenta. So polenta, again, very famous dish up in the mountains. This is what you eat after you go skiing and you're in the chalet, but it was also, they were very poor here. So this is what they would eat a lot of. And then the third picture is risotto with funghi porcini. So a lot of people on their free time, they go porcini mushroom hunting here. So you have to get up really early because you don't want other people to see you. And you go hunt for porcinis. And so yeah, they're really well known in these mountain valleys. And of course, rice is very famous here because on the flat part, on the foot of the mountains, we have lots of rice paddies. So the main towns in Piemonte for rice are called Vercelli and Novara. And I don't know if you guys know the risotto that's called arborio, for example. Arborio is an actual town here in Piemonte. And as well as Gorgonzola is also a town, and this is where the cheese Gorgonzola actually comes from. But this is towards Milan on an extreme of on that side. Any questions about these dishes or the food? But you can see why when I first came here, it was like, where's the pasta with tomato sauce and, fish?
I can see why it was very difficult to be a vegan. I'm not surprised that didn't last very long.
No, and then when I'd say I was a vegetarian, because everything is mostly meat-based, it was like they would just bring me hunks of cheese and hunks of eggs and it was like, oh my God, this is terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, eat slim pickings.
I didn't know, it's very delicious though, I have to say. Okay, moving on. So we talked about the mountains, and now I just wanted to focus a little bit on Torino, so the capital of our region. And they call it the Little Paris because there's a lot of French influence, obviously. And this was home, Piemonte was part of the Kingdom of Savoia. So the Savoy family was a royal family, and it included parts of France, Piemonte, and the island of Sardinia. And this was the kingdom back in the 1700s. And so there's a lot of influence. Napoleon was a big presence here in Piemonte. And so it's called our Little Paris. There's a ton of things to do here in the city. We have lots of museums. So you can see I wrote Automobile Museum, Cinema Museum, and Egyptian Museum. Again, probably not what you would expect. These are the most famous museums that we have in Torino. One, because Fiat, this is the headquarters of Fiat. You all know the Fiat
Yeah,
brand.
yeah.
So Fiat is from Torino. Also, the Cinema Museum became it was a big collection of I don't know, cinema things. And then you see in this picture, there's the monument. It's called the Mole Antoniella. And it's actually inside of this monument, the most representative monument that we have in Torino. And so it's really cool because you go through this whole museum and then you can go all the way up to the top of that spire with an elevator and you have a view of all the Alps. So it's really, really
And
fun.
that's the cinema museum.
That's the cinema
Wow.
museum. Yeah.
And is it just Italian cinema or kind of everything?
No, it's everything. But we have to
Wow, yeah.
remember that, post World Wars and the neoclassicism and all the Italian cinema was a really, really big deal. So it was important to this area.
Yeah.
And then we have the last museum is the Egyptian Museum. It's the second largest Egyptian museum after Cairo. And this is because the King Emanuele III fell in love with these artifacts that started coming in from Egypt. And so he was sending people to Egypt to start collecting different artifacts. And this was around 1753. And that's when they started collecting. And now there's real mummies in there. And it's one of the most visited museums in all of Italy, actually. So
Wow.
yeah, really interesting. But again, unexpected for Italy. Then we have all these beautiful big piazzas like Piazza San Carlo, Piazza Castello. There's an actual castle in the middle of the town. And this is also where the royal family resided, was in the squares in the town of Torino, in the city of Torino. Then we have big parks with the Po River that started up in the Monviso mountain and ran all the way through the city of Torino. And there's canoeing that goes up, kayaking on there, lots of cafes. It's an old little medieval castle right in the middle of the park. Then we also have the Turin Shroud. This is really unique. They only put it out on display like once every 10 years or once in a while. So this is actually a cloth that they believe was the cloth that Jesus was put in after the crucifixion. And so you can actually see his face and his bones and his body. I actually waited in line. I was lucky to have seen it in person, and I think I waited like 4 hours to get in, and then you just walk right by and you see this cloth, but it's special and something really unique about Torino.
Wow.
And then we have Porto Palazzo Market, which is one of the largest, it is the largest outdoor market in all of Europe. So it's an octagonal shaped outdoor area, and we have all kinds of vendors, and it's a huge deal.